Welcome to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White, the real dragon slayer, author and entrepreneur sales coach. Tune in weekly for human conversation about business and sales. Enjoy business expert interviews, educational episodes, and virtual cuppers with entrepreneur business owners. So grab yourself a cuppa and enjoy. Here is your host, Jules White.
So welcome everybody to the Human Conversation. I've got a fabulous guy with me tonight. He's from the US of A. Now, where are you, Scott, in the US?
I live in Austin, Texas these days.
Right, Austin, Texas. This is Scott Leese from Austin, Texas. And he's the CEO and founder of Scott Leese Consulting. Is that right, Scott?
That's right, yep.
I did good.
You did good. Run my own consulting business, and I also run a business called Surf and Sales as well. So
yes, so we're going to talk about that because that's exciting. Well, it's all exciting, really. But so obviously, Scott, you are in sales, like I am. You know, not all my guests are from the sales place. I'd really like to touch on a bit of sales in terms of your philosophy, your thoughts around sales. You kind of know mine. I came on your podcast, which thank you for having me as a guest. That was such fun. So you kind of know where I come from on sales, I think, but we can sort of bat that around. But tell us a bit about where you started, because, you know, there's always this bit, isn't there, where we sort of leave school or we leave education. Did you really know what you wanted to do?
yeah, no, I think it's extremely common in the sales profession for people to just randomly end up here. I wrote a book a few years ago called Addicted to the Process, and it's kind of geared for people who are just getting into sales or thinking about getting into sales. And the very first line of the book says, "Sales is the garbage can of jobs." What I meant is, like, it's just the place where all of everybody else's trash goes, but there's some gold in there sometimes, right? It's like, I had a liberal arts degree, you know. I studied psychology and religion in school. I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do with myself or my life. I just took those classes because that's what was interesting to me at the time.
Yeah.
And I even continued that into higher ed. I ended up getting a master's degree in learning and instructional technology. Again, I didn't want to go work yet, so I felt like, well, I could, go to grad school. That's still like a responsible thing to do, but I didn't know what I was doing. And then, my life took a very significant sideways turn. I ended up getting extremely sick right before my 23rd birthday. And I spent the next 4 years in the hospital fighting for my life.
Oh, wow.
I ended up with multiple, immune deficiencies, and I ended up with ulcerative colitis, and then kidney stones all over the place, and organs started to fail. And I went from being a 6'2", 195-pound athlete to 6'2", 140-pound bedridden, fighting for his life, person for years. Wow. And I've had 9 surgeries now in my life. 4 major abdominal surgeries, 2 emergency life-saving surgeries. Got addicted to opioids in the process of all of that, had to kick off all those drugs. And so by the time I was, quote unquote, healthy, and back, into the real world, I had to figure out what the hell I was going to do with myself. And I was 27 years old before I started in sales. And it was the first real job that I ever had. I had only worked previously like coaching or playing sports. That was it. Yeah. And so that's how I ended up in sales. I felt like all of my degrees that I had were completely useless. I'd forgotten everything. I'm like, what am I going to do with myself? Well, I thought of sales because, it's competitive. So that competitiveness like appealed to the athlete in me. I understood that if you do really well, you get paid well. If you don't, you get fired. I understood that as an athlete. Like, if I play poorly, I get cut from the team. And so that was it. That's how I ended up in sales. This is not a traditional route whatsoever. I'm not one of these people that, walked around the neighborhood selling candy bars or had a, lemonade stand or anything like that. I had no interest in that stuff growing up.
Do you know, I love some of the stuff in this. I don't love the fact you were poorly, by the way. That's really not good at all. And I want to just ask something about that. But I love the fact that you did psychology. I'm so jealous because I would love to, no, as an older adult, I would love to do something around psychology because I just am fascinated by people. Do you feel like the psychology has actually helped with your sales?
Oh, 100%. I had no idea at the time. So I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression and think that I, had the foresight to think about that.
Yeah.
But 100%, now in the States, it's very common for people to get a psychology degree and then go get an MBA. And you sort of combine this understanding of human beings and human behavior and thought with real business, acumen. And the marriage of those two seems to set business people up really well for success. So, just knowing human emotions and behavior and how to listen. I mean, when I was in school, the dean of the psychology, department in my university tried her hardest to get me to be a therapist. She was like, you're naturally gifted. People come to you and ask you for advice all the time. And, you just get it. Right. And she really wanted me to go that route. And I think that has helped me, not just as a seller, but also as a leader. I think I have a high degree of empathy for people based on some of the things that I've been through, and then combine that with some of the understanding of how people learn. That's given me an advantage in how I build and structure sales trainings and things like that. So I think absolutely. And I think anybody who has like a psychology background or philosophy or maybe sociology or things like that, I think all of these kind of educational backgrounds that are traditional liberal arts, non-business degrees, I think they really help as you move into sales.
Yeah, I think so too. And I don't have them. I haven't got those qualifications, but I think I'm a bit intuitive to that stuff. I think I'm pretty emotionally intelligent. So
Mm-hmm.
I almost wish I should have done or could have done something. I probably still could, by the way, Scott. I'm
Yeah.
just not brilliant at that academic stuff. I
Yeah.
much rather be doing business stuff. When you became poorly, was it just very sudden, or was this, something that was genetic, or what happened?
It came out of nowhere, and it was like somebody flipped a switch, and once the switch got flipped, it wouldn't go off. I mean, I played 2 sports in college for 4 years, was the captain of both teams, played every sport you could think of when I was a little kid. Um, and I felt like I was invincible, right?
Yeah.
Like 22 years old, I'm in grad school, I'm, 2-sport athlete, I'm in good shape. And then just boom, you know, and talk about like a humbling experience,
Mm.
right? And, when you're that age, you're like, I had all sorts of crazy thoughts, like, there's many times I didn't think I was going to survive. You start thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to have a girlfriend again. I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to have kids, and look, I am put together in a way that normal people are not put together right now. Like I have no large intestine. I have had a colostomy bag at times, and that has been taken down now, and they've restructured like my insides. And so I have all sorts of challenges even now that quote unquote normal people, might not have, and they don't know the cause. People don't know where some of these diseases like ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, these autoimmune diseases come from.
No.
Is it genetic? What was it, diet? This is 20 something years ago, before things like, gluten-free diets and dairy-free diets, were known and talked about. I didn't know about any of that stuff.
No.
Well, turns out I'm allergic to like 41 different foods.
Wow.
of wheat, dairy, like all these things are a part of those things. So I could have been sort of slowly poisoning myself for 20 something years and not known it. But I try not to dwell too much on how it all happened, and just been much more focused on, well, what am I going to do now? And I can choose to let it kind of hold me down, or I can turn it into some kind of superpower and try to share my story with other people, that even if you've gotten a late start in your career, or if you've had lots of health challenges, I'm sort of living, breathing proof that you can make it through it out the other side, and things might not ever be perfect, but they certainly can be okay, and you can still have a successful career and somewhat happy life.
It's amazing, honestly. And, we take so much for granted, Scott. We really, really do. And it's only when something hits us and then we have to go through, some sort of adversity, that's when we start to really appreciate, I think the smaller and the finer things in life, Yeah. So I'm thrilled you've come through to where you have. I'm thrilled that we can share that part of your story, because I think for the listeners that will be inspiring. It is to me. But I want to know what a daily food plan looks like for you. What can you eat, Scott?
The most basic of things. I mean, the good news is that it makes me eat really healthy. So I'm not eating junk food, right?
Yeah.
I basically can eat fruits and vegetables and protein, and that's about it. And
Yeah.
there's certain vegetables and fruit that I have to avoid, but for the most part I can have all of them. So I eat eggs. I can eat, luckily, right?
Yeah.
And I make smoothies all the time. I can't, my body cannot process green leafy vegetables.
Oh,
So
wow.
I can't eat salads. So in order for me to get greens, I stick it in the blender and mix it in with, smoothie and that kind of stuff. But my favorite thing to eat that I can get away with is tacos, because I can have chicken or meat, and I'm not allergic to corn. So I can have corn tortillas, and beans are okay for me. And luckily I can eat, some rice. So, I just make myself little tacos all the time. But
Oh, that sounds
I don't,
good.
it is a pain in the neck for me to try to go out to restaurants and stuff like that. I got to be real
Yeah.
careful about what they put in the ingredients.
Yeah, I was going to say that must be really tough, because I think as much as restaurants have adapted and actually they cater much better than they ever did, it's that whole process of you not really knowing what's in there,
Yep.
and
And,
that's really
and people,
important.
goof every now and then, and those goofs have bad consequences for people like me. And
Yeah.
it's not their fault, really, but it just makes it a little bit scary. The brutal part, Jules, is that I have not had beer in like 20 years.
I was just going to ask you about that. Can you drink
Or
anything?
I drink tequila. Everybody who knows me here knows that tequila, Scott, is like that's my thing. That's
I love that.
the one thing that I can drink. So I've become a bit of a tequila aficionado and snob.
Lovely. I love that. That's such a great story. So, there's another element of this. We've talked about psychology, which feeds into sales. We've also now talked about mindset, haven't we? Big
Sure.
style. So I feel like that must have been a massive advantage for you in response to sales, to have gone through that journey you've just told us about.
Yeah. Well, I think if you combine the lessons I learned, as an athlete, in terms of losing and failing and getting back up and trying again and again and again, with, the resiliency required to survive the health challenges that I had, not to get like too morbid, but, imagine being in the hospital for 4 years straight and not, breathing fresh air and not knowing what's going on, and losing days on end because you were asleep and things like that. I mean, it's very, very difficult. And there's little things that I picked up and learned along the way, such as stop worrying about the outcome, meaning being healed, and start worrying about the process, meaning, okay, can I survive the next 15 minutes until the doctors come back? Can I get to tomorrow because we're going to start this new medicine tomorrow? And so I, without knowing it, was really working on mindset and process and micro goals and, baby steps that build up to the macro goal and things like that. The one thing that I was able to do in the hospital, and again, remember, this is 20 something years ago. So there's no internet, there's no Netflix, there's no podcasts, there's no audio books, right? Like, I did have paperback books that, people would bring me. And so I read everything that I could, and that, I think, kickstarted some learning for me, just like a desire to kind of learn. And I wasn't reading business books or sales books necessarily. I was reading Deutsch Gaetsky and like all sorts of, whatever somebody brought me, I would read. So I think I come out of all that now, and I have this different mindset and mentality, right? And one of the things that I learned is I have nothing left to be afraid of, because most likely I have already faced down and defeated the hardest thing I'm ever going to deal with again in my whole entire life. So what do I care if somebody hangs up the phone on me, right? What do I care if I miss my quota? I'm a VP of sales. What do I care if I get fired from this job? Do you think that matters to me given what I've been through? And so I just have this different perspective on things. And I also have a different sense of urgency than most people, because I know what it's like to feel like you're on top of the world and have the rug completely ripped out from under you and have absolutely nothing. So I'm walking around every day going, I don't know how much longer I have, truly. And so I'm trying to do as many things as humanly possible and maximize every single moment, So everybody who knows me would tell you, I don't know how you do all these things, how you do that. People tease me that I must have cloned myself, and how, they're like, slow down, Scott, you should rest. And I'm like, no, I don't want to rest. I already rested. I have to make up for lost time. So I think my sense of urgency is more heightened than other people. And the perspective that I have of, we have very limited opportunities in this life. And so we need to make the most out of every single one. And I'm not going to spend my time doing something that doesn't excite me or I'm not passionate about. I'm going to spend my moments, being productive and doing things that make me happy and so forth. And all of those things factor into the mindset required to be, I think, successful in sales, successful in leadership, and successful as a entrepreneur and business owner now, just like, you and I both are.
Yeah, I love that so much. I want to share something around that, the whole urgency thing, because obviously I haven't been through anywhere near your journey, with personal health, but I lost my mum and my dad within 3 months. So I lost mum, within 3 months, mum was diagnosed, we lost her. Within 3 months, dad was diagnosed and I lost him. And there's about a 3-year gap between that happening. That's probably been the hardest things I would say that I've dealt with, is losing my parents. When I lost my dad, I started to feel exactly what you just described about urgency. I don't know why. Maybe it just came from the fact that I saw within 3 months your life's gone, when we didn't even expect it. And they weren't young, Scott, but the fact is they were fit and healthy and always there and driving and cooking, and all of a sudden gone, and I think that has definitely made me feel exactly as you described. I need to be on, I need to be doing, I want to do this, and I want to make this work, and I want to be successful, and I am 100 miles an hour, and I probably shouldn't be 100 miles an hour at times, but I totally resonate with what you've just said to me. That's exactly how I feel in my mindset. And I'm excited to feel that way, if that makes sense, It
makes total sense to me. I often talk to people who tell me that they wish I could lend some of that urgency or that, enthusiasm to go over to them, and I kind of tease them and say, well, I wish you could give me some of your chill. 'Cause
Yeah.
I have a hard time just sitting still. you know?
Totally, yeah.
I don't look forward to, the weekend so I can sit on the couch all day. Like I'm not here for that,
No, I know. I totally get it. So I want to talk about your business in terms of, your thoughts around sales. Um, my upbringing in sales, I've had 32 years in sales, as you know, was very much about transaction, process, and figures, targets, revenue. And I get that's what drives sales. I get that. But I've always felt there was just this big chunk missing, which was a bit about relationship and connection and that human stuff, which actually you've mentioned with the whole psychology piece in a sense. So everything I do is actually really focused on that as opposed to the other stuff. I've almost gone the other way with it. Tell me about sales, your thoughts, and what I've just said to you.
You know, so here I am. I'm 27 years old. I get into sales. I have no idea what I'm doing. There's not communities like LinkedIn and things like that. The amount of the knowledge share just wasn't the same. And I didn't get any kind of formal training or anything like that. And I never have went through any of these fancy formal sales trainings that are out there, like spin selling and Sandler sales and all of these things. I'm kind of anti-establishment. Like I don't, I kind of rebel. So when people are like, oh, you should read all these things that are like the 10 commandments, I'm like, oh, like I don't relate to that at all. I had long hair down to my chest and a big beard when I was younger playing soccer, and everybody would call me Jesus and a hippie and all these things. Nowadays people tell me I look half homeless all the time. Like, I'm not that formal education kind of guy. What I did have though was an understanding of like how to make people change their thinking and their behavior. And so as I started going about selling, it all related to my experiences with recovery and the addiction process. And if anybody, is listening has gone through that or is going through it themselves or with family and friends, that you can't just tell somebody they have a problem and then they immediately go change it. It doesn't work like that. Yeah. Nor can you just walk up to somebody and say, hey, I found this rehab facility for you. It's amazing. And they're like, oh, perfect. Off we go. It doesn't work like that, right? So I started my sales career by thinking, how can I get Jules to kind of admit to me that she has a challenge or a problem? So I got to ask these kind of questions to learn more about her business, rather than me just saying, hey, Jules, I was on your website. I saw that it was terrible. Would you like some? Right? Like,
he doesn't really mean that, listeners. He doesn't really mean that. No, I don't mean
that. For example. Yeah. But rather than doing that, it'd be like, well, hey, Jules, I was on your website. I noticed that there's no chat bot on there. Is there any reason for that? And I just start the conversation, right? And eventually Jules will be like, yeah, I really need to get, better at communicating quickly with prospects who are on the site. Okay, well, now she's admitted she has a problem to me. And that's like the first step. But we all know, I shouldn't say that. Many of us know functioning addicts or alcoholics who know they have a problem, but don't really see like there's any value or urgency to fixing this particular problem. They're not at risk of losing their job or their family or anything like that. Or they just don't even understand what difference it makes health-wise or something like that. So now that I got somebody to admit they had a problem to me, I would spend time educating them and try to make them understand why they should even care about this particular issue or this problem. And once I got them to kind of admit they have a problem and understand why it's important, now I would try to help them understand that this is a pretty big deal. Like, this is not a little paper cut. Like, you got a pretty bad, wound here on your finger, and we need to do something. We need to stitch it up, right? Mm. And that's where the urgency piece would come into play. And I found that then and only then would people be open to listening to my solution or my product or what I do. And so without knowing it, that was how I started selling. And over time, I refined it to this process that I wrote about in my book. It's my addiction model of selling. You've got to get somebody to admit they have a problem, then understand the value of solving this problem, feel the sense of urgency behind it, and then and only then are they open to hearing about your solution and your product. And I do everything in that particular order. And I just stumbled upon that, and it was working for me as an individual contributor. When I got moved into a sales management role, that's how I started teaching folks. And I applied it as a VP in transactional sales environments. Then I started applying it in mid-market and low enterprise environments. And now, as I run my consulting business, I'm applying it all over the place in enterprise orgs, transactional orgs, Australia, New Zealand, America, all over the place, right? Across different verticals. So that's my overarching philosophy around sales. And to your point, it is much more, in my opinion, about the human connection. I'm not throwing something down your throat, right? Or pushing something upon you. It is a series of questions that turn into a conversation. And eventually somebody says to me, well, what do you do? Like, I suppose you can help me with all this kind of thing. All right, well, yeah, let's talk about that. And that's worked very well for me.
I love that you weren't trained, because I reckon that was a huge advantage for you to just find your own way.
Well, it's only an advantage now because I made it out and was able to succeed.
Yeah, I know.
I don't recommend people go get into sales and don't get any kind of training. But to your point though, like, I didn't get any bad habits from somebody else, and I didn't try to apply all these, methodologies from 10, 15, 20 years prior to me getting in the industry that didn't feel right to me. Yeah. And one of the things I tell people is, whether, Jules' methodology or Scott's methodology or Sandler's methodology is the one you use, I really feel like you have to vibe really well with this particular philosophy or methodology, and it has to match and mirror who you are as a person. And if when you find that method or that person whose teachings and words like suit you, I think you go all in with that and you stick with that, and you don't need to confuse yourself with all these other things. I talk to so many people early in their career and they're like, oh, I read 47 different books on sales and now I'm so confused, like which one to follow on. I'm like, oh God, yeah, I wish you wouldn't have done that, right?
Yeah.
So,
that's a really good point though, isn't it? I think in this search sometimes for knowledge, I think people do read too many different versions, and then actually they do end up quite confused. That really can happen.
You see that in all other areas of life too. Like, do you ever go to the market and they have like 30 different fish options, and you're like, oh my God, I don't know what to pick? Or you ever go to the pub and they have like 200 pints on tap, and you're like, I don't know which one, right?
No, but you'll have tequila, won't you, Scott?
I have tequila. Yeah. If there's too many options of tequila, I just stare at the thing and I'm like, I don't know what to pick. But if you just present me with a couple and one of them is what I like, I'm like, okay, that's my one. It's easy.
Yeah, it is easier.
I have clarity then. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we need an element of choice, but too much is just mind blowing, isn't it, for us? So yeah,
that's a better way to put it than I put it.
And then I kind of add in the whole UHP conversation that we had on your podcast, which is this unique human proposition, which I've kind of completely made up, but I really love, which is where it's the same as what you've said. It's almost you take whichever methodology you feel is really right for you, and you almost then make it yours, and put your stamp on it. And that's one of my passions, is that every salesperson almost feels different, because they're just being uniquely them. So that's what UHP is driving towards, from my perspective.
Yeah, I just love that you created your own thing, and you haven't tried to recycle somebody else's thing. So I'm a big fan of sales leaders who just think differently and try to get creative, because so much of this stuff has been said the same way for 20, 30 years. So
Yeah, yeah.
good on you for coming up with UHP.
Oh, well, thank you. And I definitely had to be different. Whatever I was going to do, it had to feel different to what I'd had for the last 30 years in my career, you know, because that just didn't feel right. So obviously we have to mention the P word. No, actually, we don't have to. But you know what? We're in the middle of pandemic right now, and we still are. And I am going to say we're in the middle of it because it's all over the place over here. We're shutting down again in certain towns. I'm sure you're seeing similar where you are, Scott.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
what do you think it's done to sales? Do you think it's defined a new future for sales?
I don't know if it's defined a new feature or not. What I think it's done is it has exposed mediocrity in a really brutal, painful way. I think mediocre sales reps have found themselves out of a job. I think mediocre sales organizations have fallen to bits because they didn't have the right things set up. I think mediocre sales leaders have not been able to, you know, maintain momentum. And I think mediocre companies and mediocre products haven't been able to get the results. But I think really good products and really good leaders and really good salespeople are still selling and still thriving, if not surviving.
Mm.
And I hope this doesn't come off as callous, because there's a lot of people out there struggling and hurting who have lost their jobs. I don't know about the UK as much, but here in America, it's a mess.
Mm.
And so I feel badly, but you know, that has been the biggest kind of change, I think, is all the people who just kind of were like ho hum or didn't care too much or didn't put the right amount of time in or whatever. You're in big trouble, you know. And now there's like 10, 20, 30, 40 people per open role for sales here in the States. And you know, you go through an interview process with me and you're mediocre, and I have 35 other candidates for this one job, I'm going to find somebody who's a superstar.
Yeah.
And I don't have to hire somebody who's meh or just kind of okay.
Yeah.
So I think people are really having to find new and creative ways to stand out, to increase and grow their skill set, to participate and get more active in different communities. So, you know, I think there's been an explosion of things like, you know, daily webinars and, you know, ask me anything type sessions and trainings and things like that. You and I have both participated in a bunch of them.
Yeah.
There's all these micro communities that have sprouted up. You know, there's Revenue Collective, there's Revenue Genius. I host an event called Thursday Night Sales, which
Yeah.
is
It's
every Thursday night.
it needs to be earlier so that I can come. I keep telling you.
Well, you know, Jules, you have the ability to create a UK version of Thursday Night
I do. This is true. I might just do it.
Sales.
Will you come on if I do?
Yes, I will come on if you do. Yes. But people, I think, are searching for this connection and this growth and these learning opportunities and so forth. So those have been the two biggest things to me, is this exposure of mediocrity and the casualties they're in, and the rise of like constant free learning opportunities that people, you know, have at their fingertips. And hopefully people are taking advantage of these things and sharpening their skills, because it's a difficult time, you know,
Yeah.
out for a lot of people.
It's a difficult time, but equally what you've just said is that there's an amazing array of knowledge out there for them to catch up on right now, isn't there?
Every single day. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, but I would be willing to bet a lot of money that if you and I spent an hour hunting around, we probably could have found 3 or 4 events to attend today for free.
Yeah.
And listen to sales leaders from all over the world talk about what's working, what's not working, new and latest trends. I could have been networking, you know, in the chat bot and in these different communities with everybody, growing my network, learning from them, hearing about open roles, right? All of this stuff. And I mean, I do all this stuff now and I'm not even looking for a job.
Yeah, exactly. But that's because you're you, isn't it? That's your whole ethos. It's wonderful. I want to just, I want to talk about, well, just quickly, it seems natural for us to say, and actually, you know, the transatlantic throwdown was such a great example. You know, we may as well just say, because that's actually where I first saw you, because the boys were being the boys, the UK versus the US boys, in this wonderful event, which was hosted by the fabulous Daryl Prowl, who looks wonderful with his beard. I must make sure I plug that. It's fabulous. And he's such a great host. And so he put on this event, which then I watched it back. And you US guys, oh my goodness, you absolutely smashed the UK out of the park. I mean, honestly, you really did. You were brilliant. And then I was approached to go on The Girls Be the Girls, which was fantastic. How exciting that they picked me. And we had such an amazing time. It was so good. And the audience voted for the winners, but the audience learnt so much from us. I mean, that's not a big-headed statement, but oh my goodness, how much gold was there in those events?
Yeah, I mean, I've rewatched both of those, and because the first time through, like, I missed things. You know, I mean, when I was participating, I missed a ton. And then during the women's event, I missed a ton. I was taking notes, but like, you know, everybody's talking fast and everything. Yeah. There's so many just like amazing little mic drop kind of moments and everything. You know, between the two events, we had damn near 1,500, 2,000 people in attendance on those events.
Globally, right? From around the world, wasn't it?
Yeah. And those are perfect examples of, you know, salespeople and sales leaders, you know, giving back, trying to be helpful, creating a community, keeping it fun and different and interesting, and just trying to deliver value. And hopefully people, you know, if they haven't checked those out, they should go in.
I'm going to put the links in so that they can see those, because they're amazing. And okay, surf and sales.
Yeah.
I love this. Tell me, I actually want to come, but obviously at the moment, you know, we're a bit stuck. But
that makes two of us. Surf and sales is looking at where we are now with the pandemic and everything. I mean, we're ahead of our time a little bit, because we started this in late 2017 because we didn't like the idea of these mega conferences with 100,000 people, right? Whether it's Dreamforce or I forget the one in London that is so massive all the time, but there's conferences everywhere, right? And, you know, you go to the same cities and the same hotels and it's the same. And everybody's trying to pitch you and people are running around to parties. And, you know, if you're a business owner and you send your salespeople there, they come home with like maybe a couple business cards and a hangover. And that's about it. And so my co-founder and I, Richard Harris, were like, how come nobody has a conference for sales and sales leaders in a cool place like Costa Rica, right? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I would much rather go do that. I'm like, and why does it have to be, you know, from 8 a.m. to like 9 p.m. with me sitting in the conference room somewhere trying to stay awake? Like, if I'm going to go somewhere, I want to have a little bit of a vacation while I learn, right? And so, you know, he was like, well, yeah, why don't you create it, Scott? I'm like, well, maybe I will, and maybe you should help me, you know, build it. So that was where it started. And so, you know, I'm a avid surfer, and you know, I'm like, well, why don't I put this thing together in Costa Rica? Why don't we rent a couple houses right on the water, hire some local surf instructors to teach everybody, hire some locals to get, you know, all the local food and drinks, and they cook for us and they clean for us and all stuff. And we go on some fun adventures like zip lining and go into town and things like that. And so we bring, you know, 16, 17 people, plus there's 3 hosts. So there's a group of 20 of us, and it's a small, intimate group of people who are all kind of like-minded, right? Who want to go learn, but they also want more of an experience than just going to this, mega conference. They're going there to spend 5-6 days in a row with people like you and I, right? Imagine the conversations that you and I can have if we're in the same room in this tropical environment where our creative juices are flowing and we're more open and relaxed, right? And then, we've had a couple drinks and the ideas and creativity are flowing. You leave there with 20, best friends almost.
Absolutely,
that will do anything for you to help promote your book, refer clients to you. We've had people hire each other from these events, right? And so it's just like such a powerful networking experience. Would I rather do that, or would I rather collect random business cards at the Hilton Hotel in, St. Louis or someplace like that, right? And so we've had 4 of them. We sold all 4 of them out. We've got a lot of sponsors. We snuck one in February this year before everything shut down. So feel really blessed for that. But we had 3 others planned this year that, are not going to happen. But the good news is when we're all able to travel and do things again, I think we're really well positioned, because I think it'll be a long time before you or I want to go inside into a conference with 100,000 people.
Yeah.
But to go outside to the beach with 15 to 20 people to get more powerful learning and training on sales and sales leadership and career advice, I think that there's a big pent up demand for that right now. And every single day I have people messaging me, hurry up and run a surf sales. Like, I need to get the hell out of here, right?
Yeah, I think it sounds amazing. And I actually think you would come home and you would never quite be the same. That's how I feel.
Well, I can refer you to about 80 people who come who would concur with that.
Yeah, and I definitely want to come to the next one, so I'm going to have to stay in touch with you.
It would be amazing. If you come, I would be asking you to lead a session. It's not just me and Richard training. That's one of the beautiful things is, if we have people like you come, okay, Jules, you get to do a session, and, Daryl comes, Daryl runs a session. So I'm not going there to just teach for a week. I want to learn. I want to learn as well. So we're all kind of, teaching each other, and it's just
sounds amazing.
It's a wonderful experience.
Sounds amazing. Well, look, I absolutely would love to talk to you all night. I mean, I really mean that. You probably hear me say it on all my podcasts, but my guests are fascinating, and you very much are. I want you to be able to tell the listeners how you can work with them and how they connect with you. So how would I work with you?
Well, that's slightly complicated, so allow me to explain. My primary business, I work with early stage companies who are trying to scale from 0 to 25 million in revenue. That's my main consulting business. I serve as a strategic advisor to a half dozen to a dozen companies around the world at any given time. But I also have started doing a lot of private sales coaching. So I work with CEOs and VPs and SDRs and AEs as well. So, if you're interested in any of those kind of services, if you run a business that, is looking to build a foundation in their sales team to help grow and scale, I've done this many times before. I did it 6 times as an operator. 5 times I got over 20 million in under 3 years. I've done it dozens of times now as an advisor to companies. I've had multiple exits. So I've got a good track record of doing that kind of stuff. As far as how to get a hold of me, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I recently started my own Patreon group, which
I saw that.
Yeah, it's been really fun, and it's a lot easier for me to communicate with people because, there's like 120 people right now in my Patreon group as opposed to 54,000 in my network on LinkedIn. Yeah. So it's a little less noisy, so easier for me to kind of communicate with people. But one of the things that I sort of pride myself on with my brand, if you will, is that I'm very accessible. So anybody who sends me messages, I might not get to it right away, but I make a point to get to every single message and respond to everybody. So if anybody out there is listening and wants to reach out to me, please do so. And I promise you, I'll get back to you.
And we will put the links into this podcast anyway, so people can do that. And we're so like-minded in that way, because I'm the same. You know, I want to make sure I respond to everybody if they reach out to me. And some days that's really tough, but other days, you know.
Yeah. It feels like a full-time job sometimes.
Yeah,
you know?
It does.
But it's very worth it. I always say, you know, you never know who you might be able to help, and you never know who might be able to help you.
No, exactly.
Might as well communicate with as many people as you can.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm going to be starting a membership in September, so I know you're going to be proud of me.
Good for you. Yeah.
Because it's the same as you. It's that more intimate space where I can kind of feel closer. And do you remember, have you met Travis King?
Travis King, absolutely. He helps me with all of the Surf and Sales podcast episodes. Yeah.
Okay, so Travis, I went on his podcast and we met on LinkedIn and we chatted, and he's just fabulous. I love him. And he came onto my podcast and we talked about Dunbar's number. And I posted about it on LinkedIn today, actually. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dunbar's number. Have you heard of that?
I feel like I've heard of it, but I could not tell you what it is right now, and I'll have to go look at your post.
Yeah, have a look at the post. But it's basically the fact that you really, really can't engage fully with more than 150 people. I mean, it's a guesstimate, but it's a really good example. And then so you'll have like 5 really intimate friends, you'll have 15 best friends, and you'll have 50 people that, you know, you are really connected with, and 150 who you can engage with, you know. But then beyond that, you can't, you might know them, but you can't possibly engage with them in the way that you might want to, you know. And it's really interesting. Yeah, you're going to love it, because it's totally why you have Patreon, totally why I want a membership, is that kind of piece where I can just be more intimate with a smaller number of people. That's how I see it in terms of my membership. So yeah, I'll send you the link for the post. You can have a look at it.
Yeah, please do.
So I'll put the links in how they can connect with you, Scott. We've covered so much in this podcast. I've loved this human conversation, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
What's your last final parting thoughts for our listeners?
Oh boy. I try to be thoughtful with my response here, and I'm going nowhere. I think my response would be, I think that now is the time, and there's never been a better time to build and grow your network and put that network to good use. I think gone are the days where, you know, it's a point of pride to like bang your head against the wall all by yourself until you figure things out.
Yeah.
None of us need to do that anymore, right? Here we are, you know, 6 months ago, you and I had never met, right? And now, you know, we've kind of co-partnered on the transatlantic stuff. You've been on my show. I've been on your show. You know, I think the world of you. I would refer business to you, like, you know, like name drop you all the time when people say who's the leader here and who's the leader there. That's just one example of how connected the world, you know, can be now. And I think there's still far too many people who are not taking advantage of these different platforms, whether it's LinkedIn or Patreon or even Twitter, or these other communities like Rev Genius and Revenue Collective and Sales Hacker and things like that. I mean, there is just a treasure trove of knowledge and wonderful people out there who will be willing to help you without ever asking for anything in return. Yeah. And so not pursuing building your network, I think, is a grave mistake right now.
Yeah, I love that. Wise words as well, really wise words. I didn't mention the Surf and Sales podcast. We sort of did, but we need to just make sure everybody knows it's called the Surf and Sales podcast, because that was the show I was on with you, and you guys are great. It's you and Richard Harris. You're kind of this double act, aren't you? It's super.
We're very different people, and it works well. We're like the odd couple or something.
Yeah. Like Scott, it's been lovely, absolutely lovely. Thank you so much for joining me. I've loved it. And listeners, I hope you've really enjoyed listening to this inspiring man, because he really is. He's very inspiring. If you've listened to this on whatever platform you've listened to, like it, subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud. So yeah, come and join me again in the next episode of The Human Conversation. Until then, ta-ta for now.
You've just been listening to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White. To find out more about the other work that Jules does, please visit her website www.liveitloveitsellit.co.uk. And if you enjoyed the podcast, then please do leave a rating and review on the platform you use to enjoy her show. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.